Jaden Jefferson here, and I am joined by Ruth Steel Hernández. And we actually met a while back, and you brought up to me one issue that you're experiencing as a teacher in Queens. So, kind of talk about this.
Yes, and even before then. So I moved to New York City about 5 years ago to attend NYU. And during that time, I started translating for a professor of mine that's a medical doctor. I started going with him out when kind of the crisis started happening at the border, when all of the migrants started coming and being bused to New York City. I would go with him out to the homeless shelters where a lot of migrants were being sent to, and we would find people out. Sorry, just watching. We would find like different people outside of the shelters and just kind of talk about what's going on. Do they need help? Do they need medical care? Just what's their story? And so that was my first time kind of being exposed to the epidemic of, these poor humans that are coming and being treated so awfully. So the first family that I met, it was a like 26-year-old mom and husband and daughter. And the daughter was 6. And they had walked from Venezuela through the border, and then they had been bused. I met this family, right, this little kid, and they had told me about their experience walking from Venezuela to the border. And as soon as they got to the border, they were kind of stripped of everything. So they were, their clothes were taken, their papers were taken, basically like their belongings. And they were told like, oh, well, you can't have any of that stuff. And they were put into detention centers and then bused, halfway across the country to New York City. And so I had met them when the mom was trying to figure out how to get her daughter into school, which was really interesting for me, like going into education, because hearing their story, I knew that, this 6-year-old was enduring so much trauma. And how are you able to learn when you've endured so much trauma? And that's what I experience with my students. I have a lot of students who are coming from other countries, and a lot of them actually haven't really gone to school before. Or I teach social studies, and maybe they didn't even have social studies at their school. So it's really interesting to think about being a teacher to these students and trying to teach them. I teach about the Eastern Hemisphere. So trying to teach them about the Eastern Hemisphere while also they're becoming acclimated to the United States of America and to New York City and to speaking English and like all of these things. And you really have to be cognizant as a teacher of where your kids are coming from, because maybe they're acting out in class because of that trauma, not because they're just a bad kid, because there's trauma.
And you say that you've had more kids that have actually had to come into your classroom and be involved in the class. What's the ballpark estimate of kids that you now have in your class?
So I teach 4 classes, 30 kids in each class. My one class is dual language. So I speak Spanish and English every other day. And what a lot of times happens is with dual language classes, they put the Spanish speakers, because obviously it's easier for me to speak Spanish with them and them to start to learn. So I would say out of my 30 students that are in my dual language class, probably 18 to 19 of them are been here 2 years or less.
And what made you want to
Yeah.
jump in and help and be able to offer assistance? Because it can really be a difficult time for some school districts because they're just not fortunate enough to have staff that are capable of teaching in both languages.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because this summer I taught at a school where I had a student who, um, it was a monolingual setting, so it was not dual language, and he did not speak English. And so I feel for, luckily, I speak Spanish, but I feel for those teachers who unfortunately don't have that ability. And it really sucks for the kids, because they're kind of just sitting there and they have no clue what's going on. So I think I'm lucky to have a dual language class where I'm able to use more Spanish, because I also know of some other teachers who are in schools where they're more rigid about the languages because they want the kids to really acquire English.
And this is obviously a situation where a lot of the blame can be placed in many different hands because it's already difficult having to be in a new country. But then on top of that, the resources just aren't there. So, really, what entities do you blame for this being such a difficult transition for so many?
I definitely feel like in New York City, I'm so grateful to be a teacher in New York City because New York City really prioritizes education and treats teachers with so much respect and so much. We get a lot of funding for schools. I recently looked at statistics because obviously I'm from Ohio, and the funding is like astronomical, the disparity between education in Ohio versus education in New York. So I think I'm really lucky.
Obviously, when you're in school, it just there is that stagnantness of it all. But of course, being able to individualize the experience. So, what have been some highlights of being able to do that, especially with so many newer students?
Yes, I think so. Today, I accompanied a walking trip to see some rain gardens by my school. And there was a student, she's been in the US for 2 weeks, and this was her first day of school. And in the particular class, so this requires a little bit of background knowledge. So my school is super, super key on social emotional learning, super high on social emotional learning. So every Wednesday, the kids come for half a day and it's all social emotional learning. Like there's no content teaching, it is like social emotional learning. And so the teachers of this are bilingual, but not with Spanish. And so she was kind of just like, blah, 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 whatever. And I walked up to her and I started talking to her and explaining things. And it was like this like light bulb, like, oh my God. And she started talking to me and opening up and telling me, oh, I see this. Because our thing was, what do you see? What do you wonder? And she's like, oh, I see these like this. And really opening up. And it's those experiences for me where I'm like, I'm so lucky that I am bilingual and I do speak their language because a lot of times they get passed off as like special ed or they don't know the content when in reality it's they don't know English. So it's like they might have no clue what you're saying and they can't pass the test and they can't do the homework. But if you were to give it to them in Spanish, they would be amazing. So it's like those little moments where I'm like, I feel so grateful to know Spanish because I'm like, oh my God, you're incredible. You're so smart. And I'm able to connect with you in that. And that's how I feel every day in my classroom when the kids are like lining up to give me hugs as they walk outside the class. And it's like that connection is the reason that I went into teaching. And that's actually the reason that I really wanted to stay in New York City because unfortunately in Toledo, where I'm from, there aren't dual language programs. There aren't transitional bilingual programs. There's Escuela, which is on the right track and it's amazing. And I hope one day it really flourishes, but it's nowhere near, the schools that we have in New York. And that connection and that fire is what helps kids learn and what helps kids succeed. And I just feel so grateful that I'm able to do it in my literal content teaching. Like I can speak Spanish while I'm teaching social studies.
It just goes to show the impact of just one interaction with one person that can really just change the course of someone's life. You only need that one person to tell you, I believe in you. And that definitely shows there too. So if you just had a message for people back home in Toledo or just people across the country about the situation that you're facing, what would it be?
I would say, remember that these people are humans. These people that are coming through the border are humans, and they're not coming here for no reason. They're coming here because they want a better future. They're coming here to come to school, to get their kids a better education. A lot of my students, they have such a fire within them because they know that they came to this country for a better life. And so when I hear the rhetoric about like, oh, they're coming to steal our jobs or they're freeloaders, stuff like that. It's like, you're not here, you're not interacting with them. They're people, they're kids, like they're 10-year-olds that just want to have a better life.
they have stories too. So that's the important thing, is to just share those stories as well with other people.
Oh
So,
yeah.
well, I appreciate
Yeah,
you taking the time to chat about this. It's been wonderful.
of course.